I'll never forget the sound of my son's muffled scream. The way the crowd's laughter twisted into a blade that carved itself into my chest. It was Ethan's 5th birthday. A sunny afternoon in our backyard. Balloons swaying in the breeze. The air thick with the scent of grilled hot dogs and melted ice cream. I'd spent weeks planning every detail. From the dinosaur-themed cake to the piñata stuffed with his favorite candies. Ethan was my world. My fragile, bright-eyed boy who'd already endured more than any child should. His father, my ex-husband, had walked out when Ethan was 2, leaving me to piece together a life for us both. That day, I wanted him to feel loved, to feel safe. But my sister, Claire, had other plans. Claire, with her sharp tongue and sharper grudges, always had to be the center of everything. She'd been my shadow since we were kids, resenting every scrap of attention I got, every small victory I claimed. I thought we'd moved past it, that her love for Ethan would outweigh her bitterness toward me. I was wrong. The moment came just as Ethan leaned forward to blow out his candles, his little face glowing with excitement. The cake was a masterpiece, chocolate layers, green frosting, a T-Rex made of fondant. Everyone was singing, phones out, capturing the moment. Then Claire, standing just behind him, laughed aloud, performative cackle that made my stomach clench. Before I could react, she grabbed the back of Ethan's head and shoved his face into the cake. Frosting smeared across his cheeks, his eyes wide with shock as he gasped, chocolate crumbling into his hair. The crowd erupted, some laughing, others gasping, a few shouting her name in disapproval. Ethan burst into tears, his small body trembling as he ran to me, burying his face in my skirt. I knelt, wiping the mess from his eyes, my heart pounding with a rage I hadn't known I could feel. Claire stood there, grinning, hands on her hips like she'd just pulled off the prank of the century. "Oh, come on, Anna," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "It's just a bit of fun." Fun. That word burned through me, igniting something dark and primal. I wanted to lunge at her, to scream, to tear that smug look off her face. But Ethan was clinging to me, his sobs soaking through my clothes, and I knew I had to stay calm for him. I carried him inside, cleaned his face, and whispered promises that everything would be okay. But it wasn't. That moment wasn't just a prank, it was a violation. A deliberate act to humiliate my son, to undermine the joy I'd worked so hard to give him. As I tucked Ethan into bed that night, his eyes still red from crying, I made a vow. Claire would pay for what she did. Not with fists or screams, but with something sharper. Something that would cut deeper than she could ever imagine. The next morning, I woke with a plan forming, jagged and raw. In the back of my mind, Claire had always been careless with her secrets, trusting me to keep them because I was her sister. But loyalty has limits, and she'd crossed mine. I remembered the whispers I'd overheard years ago, the ones she thought I'd forgotten about her affair with her boss, the money she'd borrowed from our parents' savings, the lies she'd spun to keep her perfect image intact. I'd stayed silent then, out of some misplaced sense of family. But now, I saw those secrets as weapons. I started small, gathering evidence like shards of glass. A text to our cousin, asking about that loan Claire never repaid. A call to an old friend who'd seen Claire with her boss at a hotel. Each piece was a step toward justice. Not just for Ethan, but for every time she tried to dim my light to make her shine brighter. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not even my mother, who'd always defended Claire's spirited nature. I played the part of the forgiving sister, smiling at family dinners, nodding when Claire bragged about her new promotion. But inside, I was a storm building strength. I started a private journal, documenting every detail, Every conversation. Every slip of her tongue. I hacked into her old email account, used the same password since high school, and found messages that confirmed everything. Screenshots. Saved. Photos. Stored. I wasn't just building a case. I was crafting a trap. The thrill of it was intoxicating. Like I was finally taking back the power she'd stolen from me all those years. But there was a cost. Every night, as I tucked Ethan in, I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the way he flinched at loud noises. Claire's prank had left a mark, and that fueled me even more. By the time I had enough, it was 3 months later. The family was planning a big reunion at our parents' lake house, a chance for everyone to come together. It was the perfect stage. I spent weeks preparing, not just the food or the decorations, but the moment I'd unveil Claire's truth. I wanted it to be public, undeniable, a reckoning she couldn't laugh off. The night before the reunion, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and USB drives, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and anticipation. I wasn't just avenging Ethan. I was tearing down the facade Claire had built her life on. But as I looked at a photo of us as kids, Claire's arm around me, both of us smiling, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I becoming the monster I despised? I pushed it aside. Justice wasn't gentle, and neither was I anymore. The lake house smelled of pine and nostalgia, the kind of place that held every family memory, good and bad. It was a sprawling, cedar-paneled cabin with wide windows overlooking the water, where we'd spent summers as kids, where Claire and I had once been inseparable. Now, it felt like a battlefield. The reunion was in full swing by noon. Aunts and uncles milling about, cousins chasing each other across the lawn, my parents beaming as they flipped burgers on the grill. Ethan stayed close to me, his hand gripping mine, his eyes darting nervously whenever Claire's laugh cut through the air. She was in her element, charming everyone with stories of her latest work triumph, her designer dress catching the sunlight. I watched her, my stomach twisting, knowing what was coming. I'd brought a projector, claiming it was for a slideshow of old family photos. No one suspected a thing. As the sun dipped low, painting the lake gold, I gathered everyone in the living room. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady as I announced a special presentation. I plugged in the USB drive, my fingers trembling as I clicked through to the file I'd prepared. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, a timeline of Claire's lies. Emails to her boss, laced with flirtation and promises she'd never told her husband about. Bank statements showing the money she'd siphoned from our parents, disguised as emergency loans. Text messages where she mocked our family behind their backs, calling them naive, pathetic. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. Claire's face went pale, her mouth open, but no words came out. My mother gasped, her hand clutching my father's arm. Ethan, sitting on my lap, looked confused but clung tighter to me. I didn't stop there. I narrated, my voice low and deliberate, each word a hammer strike. I told them about the affair, the theft, the way Claire had manipulated everyone for years. I showed photos, receipts, even a recording of her laughing about how easy it was to fool us. The family stared, some in shock, others in anger. My cousin Rachel stood up, tears in her eyes, remembering the loan Claire never repaid. My uncle muttered something about betrayal. Claire tried to speak, her voice shaking, but I cut her off. This is for Ethan, I said, my eyes locked on hers. For what you did to my son. The room erupted, then shouts, accusations. My parents trying to calm everyone down. Claire ran outside, her husband chasing after her, and I felt a surge of triumph. I'd done it. I'd exposed her. But the victory was fleeting, as the family fractured, arguing over who knew what and when. I saw Ethan's face. He was crying, not because of Claire, but because of the chaos I'd unleashed. My mother pulled me aside, her voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this, Anna? In front of everyone. In front of your son." I tried to explain, to make her see that Claire deserved it. But her words stung. I'd wanted justice, but I'd torn open old wounds, dragged everyone into my war. That night, as I sat by the lake, the water lapping at the shore, I felt the weight of what I'd done. Claire was humiliated. Yes, but so was our family. My parents wouldn't look at me. My cousins whispered behind my back. And Ethan wouldn't let go of my hand, as if I was the one he was afraid of now. I didn't sleep. I sat up, replaying the moment Claire's face crumpled, the way her husband's eyes darkened with betrayal. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but the image of Ethan's face in that cake kept me anchored. Still, the doubt crept in. Had I gone too far? Was this justice or vengeance? The next morning, Claire was gone. Her husband said she'd left at dawn. No note. No explanation. The family was quieter now, the air heavy with unspoken blame. I tried to focus on Ethan, playing games with him by the lake. But his laughter felt forced. I'd wanted to protect him, to show him I'd fight for him. But instead, I'd shown him a mother consumed by rage. I started to wonder if I'd lost more than I'd gained. By the time we left the lake house, the family was splintered. My parents barely spoke to me, their disappointment a silent scream. My cousins took sides, some with me, some with Claire. I heard whispers that she'd checked into a hotel, that she was falling apart. I should have felt satisfied, but all I felt was hollow. I'd planned every detail of my revenge, but I hadn't planned for this: the guilt, the isolation, the way Ethan looked at me like he wasn't sure who I was. I drove home with him asleep in the back seat, the road stretching out like a question I couldn't answer. What had I done? And how was I going to fix it? Weeks passed, and the silence from Claire was deafening. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at Sunday dinners. My parents said she was staying with a friend in another city, but they wouldn't meet my eyes when they talked about her. I tried to focus on Ethan, on rebuilding the safety I'd promised him. But the house felt empty, like the air itself was holding its breath. I'd won, hadn't I? Claire was gone, her lies exposed, her reputation in tatters. But every time I looked at Ethan, playing quietly with his dinosaurs, I saw the cost. He was quieter now, less likely to smile, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd broken something in him, just as Claire had. I started to hate the woman I'd become, the one who'd let anger turn her into a weapon. I threw myself into routine, hoping it would ground me. Mornings were for Ethan's school drop-off, afternoons for work at the library, evenings for stories and bedtime. But at night, when the house was still, my mind raced. I'd check my phone, half expecting a message from Claire, an apology, a scream, anything. Nothing came. I started digging again, not for evidence this time, but for answers. Where was she? Was she okay? I called her husband, Mark, but he was curt, saying only that she needed space. I reached out to her friend, Lisa, who told me Claire was a mess, barely eating, haunted by what I'd done. I wanted to feel vindicated, but instead, I felt a knot in my chest. Had I destroyed her? One night, I found an old letter Claire had written me when we were teenagers, tucked in a box of keepsakes. It was from the summer after our dad's heart attack, when we'd thought we'd lose him. She'd written about how scared she was, how she needed me, her big sister, to hold everything together. I cried reading it, remembering the Claire who'd clung to me, who'd trusted me. Where had that girl gone? And where had I gone? The sister who'd promised to protect her. I started to see my revenge not as justice, but as a betrayal of that promise. I'd wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the pain she'd caused Ethan. But I'd lost sight of the line between right and wrong. I decided to find her. I couldn't undo what I'd done, but I could try to understand it. To face her. To face myself. Lisa gave me an address, a small apartment in a rundown part of town. I drove there on a rainy afternoon. Ethan at my parents' for the day. My heart was in my throat as I knocked on the door. Claire answered, and I barely recognized her. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes hollow, her once confident posture slumped. She didn't invite me in, just stood there, staring. "What do you want, Anna?" she asked, her voice flat. I didn't know what to say. I'd come to apologize, to confront, to explain. But all I could do was stand there, rain dripping down my face, feeling the weight of her pain. We ended up talking, not inside but on the stoop, the rain a steady hum around us. I told her about Ethan, how her prank had broken something in him, how it had broken something in me. She listened, her face unreadable, then spoke. She said she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she'd thought it was just a joke, that she was jealous of how perfect my life seemed, how everyone loved me. Her words were raw, jagged, like she was cutting herself open. She told me about her marriage falling apart, her job on the line, the shame of being exposed. I wanted to scream that she'd brought it on herself, but I couldn't. I saw the girl from that letter, scared and lost, and I realized I'd pushed her to this edge. I left without an apology, without a resolution, just a promise to talk again. Driving home, I felt a shift, like a crack in the armor I'd built. I'd thought revenge would heal me, but it had only deepened the wound. I started therapy, something I'd avoided for years, dragging Ethan along to a child counselor to help him process what happened. The sessions were hard, peeling back layers of guilt and anger, but they were a start. I began to see that justice wasn't about destroying Claire, but about rebuilding what we'd lost: Ethan's trust, my family's unity, my own sense of self. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, I felt like I was walking it, not running from it. Therapy became my anchor, a place to unravel the tangle of emotions I'd buried under my need for revenge. My therapist, Dr. Ellis, was a soft-spoken woman with sharp eyes, and she didn't let me hide. She asked about Claire, about Ethan, about the parts of myself I'd ignored for years. I talked about growing up in Claire's shadow, how her charisma always outshone my quiet determination, how I'd spent my life trying to prove I was enough. She helped me see that my anger wasn't just about the cake incident, it was about every time I'd felt invisible, every time Claire had taken something from me. But she also made me face the truth. I'd chosen to wield that anger like a weapon, and now I had to live with the consequences. Ethan's sessions were harder to witness. He'd draw pictures of the birthday party, always with a big, messy cake and a figure that looked like Claire looming over him. His counselor said he was working through shame and fear, but he was resilient, starting to smile more, to talk about the dinosaurs he loved without looking over his shoulder. I clung to those small victories, but they didn't erase my guilt. I'd exposed Claire to protect him, but I'd also exposed him to a family in chaos, to a mother who'd let rage guide her. I started writing letters to him, ones he'd read when he was older, explaining why I'd done it, promising to be better. I never sent them, but they helped me process, helped me forgive myself a little. Claire reached out a month after our talk on the stoop. Her text was simple: "Can we meet?" I agreed, choosing a neutral Spoda coffee shop downtown. She looked better, Her hair clean, her eyes less haunted, but there was a wariness in her posture, like she was bracing for another blow. We sat in a corner booth, the hum of the espresso machine filling the silence. She apologized for Ethan, her voice breaking as she described how she'd replayed that moment 1,000 times, wishing she could take it back. I wanted to believe her, but part of me still saw the smirk on her face that day. I told her about my therapy, about Ethan's progress, about the family's fractured state. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and said she was trying to fix her life, starting with her marriage, her job, herself. We didn't hug or promise to be sisters again, but we agreed to keep talking. It was a start, fragile and uncertain, but a start. I went home and told Ethan about it, keeping it simple, saying Aunt Claire was sorry and wanted to make things right. He nodded, his small hand squeezing mine, and I felt a flicker of hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. The family reunion had left scars, and not everyone was ready to forgive. My mother called, her voice tight, saying Claire was coming to the next Sunday dinner. She didn't ask if I was okay with it, just told me to be there. I felt the old anger stir, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about me, Anna Maria, it was about Ethan, about showing him a family could heal. The dinner was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Claire sat across from me, her husband beside her, both of them quiet. My parents tried to keep things light, talking about the weather, the food, anything but the elephant in the room. Ethan stayed close to me, his eyes flicking to Claire, wary but curious. After dessert, she knelt beside him, offering a small dinosaur toy, her voice soft as she apologized again. He took it, hesitant, then looked at me. I nodded, my throat tight, and he gave her a small smile. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. I watched them, my heart caught between relief and fear, wondering if we could ever rebuild what we'd lost. That night, I lay awake, thinking about justice. I'd thought it was about punishment, about making Claire pay. But now, I saw it differently. Justice was about truth, about accountability, but also about giving people a chance to change. I'd exposed Claire's lies, but I'd also exposed my own flaws, my need for control, my willingness to hurt to feel whole. I didn't know if we'd ever be a family again, not like we were. But as I listened to Ethan's steady breathing in the next room, I knew I'd keep trying. For him, for me, for the sister I still loved, somewhere deep beneath the pain. The months that followed were a slow, uneven dance towards something like healing. Claire and I met regularly, not as sisters bound by nostalgia, but as strangers learning to trust again. Our conversations were cautious, filled with pauses where old wounds bled through. She was in therapy too, working through her jealousy, her impulsiveness, the things she'd buried under her polished exterior. She told me about her childhood, how she'd felt overshadowed by me, how she'd craved attention in all the wrong ways. I listened, trying to see her not as the villain I'd painted, but as a person, flawed and hurting, just like me. It wasn't easy. Every time I saw her, I saw Ethan's tear-streaked face, but I also saw the girl who'd written me that letter, who'd needed me. Ethan was my compass. His counselor said he was making progress, starting to trust that the world wasn't full of people waiting to hurt him. I watched him play, his laughter louder now, his drawings brighter. But he still asked about Claire, about why she'd done it, and I struggled to answer. I told him she'd made a mistake, that she was sorry, that people could change. He'd nod, his small face serious, and I'd wonder if I was lying to him. Could Claire change? Could I? I kept up with therapy, digging deeper into my own anger, my need for control. Dr. Ellis pushed me to confront the parts of myself I'd ignore, the resentment I'd carried toward Claire, the guilt over my failed marriage, the fear that I wasn't enough for Ethan. The family started to mend. In fragments. My parents hosted more dinners. And Claire came. Her presence less jarring each time. My cousins were slower to forgive. Some still angry about the money she'd taken. Others wary of her intentions. I stayed quiet, letting them work through it, knowing I'd stirred this pot. At one dinner, Claire brought a photo album, old pictures of us as kids, and passed it around. It was her way of reaching out, of reminding us what we'd been. I saw Ethan smile at a picture of me and Claire on a swing, and my heart ached. I wanted him to know that version of us, not the one torn apart by my revenge. But healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, arguments, silences, moments when Claire's old defensiveness flared, or when my anger bubbled up. One night, she called me, sobbing, saying her husband was leaving her. She didn't ask for help, just talked, her voice raw with fear. I listened, not offering solutions, just being there. It was the first time I felt like her sister again, not her judge. I started to see redemption not as a destination, but as a process, one we were both stumbling through. I wrote more letters to Ethan, pouring out my hopes, my regrets, promising to be the mother he deserved, not the one who'd let vengeance define her. Ethan's 6th birthday was approaching, and I was terrified. I didn't want a repeat of last year, but I wanted him to have the joy he deserved. I planned a small party. Just family. No cake this time, just cupcakes. His choice. I invited Claire. Hesitant, but hopeful. She showed up. Quieter than usual. Carrying a gift wrapped in dinosaur paper. Ethan opened a set of books about prehistoric creatures and his face lit up. He hugged her. Unprompted. And I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully. But it was a step. After the party, Claire stayed to help clean up. And we talked. Really talked. About the future. About Ethan. About us. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. By the time summer came, I felt lighter. Like I'd shed some of the weight I'd carried since that awful birthday. The family wasn't whole. Not yet. But it was trying. Claire was trying. I was trying. And Ethan was the reason we kept going. I looked at him, playing in the backyard, his laughter echoing. And I knew I'd do anything to protect that sound. Not with revenge. Not with secrets. But with love. With patience. With the messy, imperfect work of rebuilding. I didn't know if we'd ever be the family we were. But I was starting to believe we could be something new. Something stronger. Forged in the fire of our mistakes. Summer brought a tentative peace. The kind that feels like holding your breath. Waiting for the next storm. Claire and I were talking more. Not just about the past, but about the present, her job. My work. Ethan's obsession with fossils. We weren't best friends. Not like we'd been as kids. But we were something. She'd started volunteering at a community center, helping kids with art projects. And I saw glimpses of the Claire I'd loved. The one who'd draw with me for hours. I wanted to believe she was changing. But trust was a fragile thing. And I guarded it fiercely. For Ethan's sake. He was thriving. His counselor said. His fears fading. Though he still checked with me before approaching Claire. I watched him closely, searching for signs I'd missed before. Determined not to let my guard down completely. The family dinners grew less tense. Though not without effort. My mother, ever the peacemaker, pushed us to talk. To share. To remember we were family. My father was quieter. His disappointment in both Claire and me a heavy presence. I tried to bridge the gap, bringing Ethan to their house more. letting him fill the silence with stories of school and dinosaurs. Claire came too, sometimes with Mark, who was giving their marriage another chance. I saw the strain in their eyes, the careful way they moved around each other, and I wondered if they'd make it. I wondered if we all would. My cousins were still divided, some warming to Claire, others keeping their distance. I stayed out of it, focusing on Ethan, on keeping the promises I'd made to myself. One afternoon, Claire asked me to meet her at the park, just the two of us. I was wary, but I went, leaving Ethan with my parents. She was sitting on a bench by the pond, her hands clasped tightly, her face nervous. She told me she'd been thinking about Ethan's birthday, about what she'd done, and how it had spiraled into everything else. She wanted to make amends, not just with words, but with actions. She'd started a fund for Ethan's college, small contributions from her paycheck, a way to show she was serious. I listened, my heart caught between gratitude and skepticism. I thanked her, but I didn't let my guard down. I couldn't. Not yet. We walked back to our cars in silence, the weight of our history between us. But it was a lighter weight than before. Therapy continued to be my lifeline. Dr. Ellis helped me see that my need for justice had been about more than Ethan. It was about proving I could protect him, that I wasn't the failure I'd felt when his father left. She pushed me to forgive, not just Claire, but myself. It was harder than I expected, looking in the mirror and seeing the woman who'd orchestrated that public shaming, who'd let anger consume her. I started volunteering too, at Ethan's school, helping with reading programs. It grounded me, reminded me of the world beyond my pain. Ethan loved it, beaming when I showed up, and it helped me feel like the mother I wanted to be. One evening, Claire came over unannounced, holding a box of old photos. She said she'd found them while cleaning, thought Ethan might like them. We sat on the floor, him between us, flipping through pictures of us as kids, our parents young and laughing, the lake house in its prime. Ethan asked questions, his curiosity a bridge between us. Claire told him stories, her voice soft, and I saw him relax, his guard lowering. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive her, but watching her with him, I wanted to try. I wanted him to have an aunt, not a villain. When she left, I hugged her, the first time in years, and it felt like a small victory, a crack in the wall we'd built. As fall approached, I felt a shift in myself. I wasn't the woman who'd plotted revenge, nor the one who'd felt invisible. I was someone new, someone who could hold anger and love at the same time, who could choose to build instead of destroy. Ethan was my guide, his resilience my inspiration. I looked at him, sleeping peacefully, his dinosaur books scattered on the bed, and I knew I'd keep fighting for him, not with secrets or vengeance, but with honesty, with effort, with hope. The family wasn't whole, but it was healing, and I was learning to live with the scars, to see them as proof we'd survived. Fall painted the world in golds and reds, and with it came a sense of possibility. Claire and I were finding a rhythm, not as sisters who'd never fought, but as women who'd seen the worst of each other and chosen to keep going. We met weekly now, sometimes with Ethan, sometimes alone, talking about everything and nothing. She was rebuilding her life, piece by piece, her marriage still fragile, her job demanding, but her efforts visible. She'd started therapy, too, and I saw changes in her, small but real. She listened more, snapped less, and when she spoke about Ethan, her voice carried a sincerity I hadn't heard in years. I wanted to believe it would last, but I kept one eye on the past, ready for the Claire who'd hurt us to reappear. Ethan was blooming. His counselor said he was letting go of the fear, trusting the world a little more each day. He'd started drawing again, Not just dinosaurs, but family stick figures holding hands. A house with a big sun above it. I saw myself in those drawings. And sometimes Claire. And it gave me hope. I planned outings with him. Simple things like trips to the museum or walks in the park. And invited Claire along. She'd bring small gifts of fossil replica. A book, and Ethan would light up, his wariness fading. I watched them together. My heart a tangle of gratitude and caution, knowing trust was earned, not given. The family was coming together. Slowly. My parents hosted a Thanksgiving dinner. The first big gathering since the reunion. It wasn't perfect, there were still silences. Glances that held old grudges, but it was better. Claire helped in the kitchen. Her laughter softer. Less forced. My cousins were there. Some still cool toward her. But others thawing. Sharing stories. Passing the mashed potatoes. Ethan sat next to me. His plate piled high. And when Claire offered him a roll, he took it with a shy smile. I caught my mother's eye. Saw the relief there. And felt a weight lift. We weren't fixed. But we were trying. And that was enough for now. I kept up with therapy. Peeling back more layers. Dr. Ellis asked me what I wanted. Not just for Ethan or Claire, but for myself. I didn't have an answer at first. I'd spent so long defining myself by my roles: mother, sister, avenger, that I'd forgotten who I was outside them. I started small. Taking up painting again. Something I'd loved as a kid. I'd sit in the backyard, Ethan playing nearby, and lose myself in colors, in shapes, in the act of creating something that wasn't about pain. It was freeing. A reminder that I could be more than my mistakes, more than my anger. One crisp morning, Claire asked me to help her with a project at the community center, an art show for the kids she worked with. I hesitated, worried about blurring lines. But Ethan was excited. So I said yes. We spent a Saturday hanging drawings, laughing with the kids. Claire's energy infectious. She was good with them. Patient in a way I hadn't seen before. Ethan joined in, painting a dinosaur mural. And when Claire praised it, his face glowed. I saw her through his eyes. Not as the sister who'd hurt him, but as someone trying to be better. It didn't erase the past, but it made the future feel possible. That night, I wrote another letter to Ethan. Not for him to read now, but for later, when he'd ask about this time. I told him about Claire. About how people can hurt each other and still find a way back. About how love is messy but worth it. I told him I was proud of him. Of his strength. Of the way he kept smiling. I sealed it. Tucked it away. And felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The family wasn't what it had been. But it was something new. Something we were building together. I looked out at the stars. Ethan's laughter echoing in my memory. And knew we'd keep going. One step. One day. One choice at a time. Winter came. Sharp and quiet. Blanketing the world in a hush that felt like a chance to start over. Claire and I were still navigating our new normal. A fragile bridge between who we'd been and who we were becoming. She was consistent now. Showing up for Ethan. For me. For the family. She'd call to check in. Not just about the big things, but the small ones: Ethan's school projects. My painting. Our parents' health. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when her old sharpness surfaced. Or when my distrust flared. But we talked through it. Clumsy and honest. I started to see her not just as my sister, but as a person. Someone carrying her own scars. Fighting her own battles. Ethan was the heart of it all. He'd started calling Claire Auntie again. His voice tentative at first. Then stronger. They'd play together at family gatherings. Building Lego dinosaurs or reading books. And I'd watch. My chest tight with a mix of joy and fear. I didn't want to hope too much. Didn't want to believe in a future that could crumble. But Ethan's trust was a guide. Showing me what was possible. His counselor said he was healing, that the trauma of that birthday was fading, replaced by new memories of love and safety. I clung to that, letting it fuel my own journey toward forgiveness, toward redemption. The family was finding its way back, not to what we'd been, but to something stronger, forged in truth. My parents were softer now, their disappointment giving way to pride in how we were trying. My cousins came around, some faster than others, drawn by Ethan's laughter, by Claire's quiet efforts. We started new traditions: game nights, movie marathons, small things that rebuilt the bonds we'd lost. At one gathering, Claire brought a scrapbook she'd made, filled with photos and notes from the community center, from Ethan's school, from our family. It was her way of saying she was here, that she wanted to stay. I saw my mother cry, my father nod, and I felt the pieces of us clicking back together. I kept painting, finding solace in it, a way to express the things I couldn't say. One evening, I showed Claire my work, a canvas of a stormy sky over a calm lake, light breaking through. She stared at it, then at me, and said it was beautiful, that it felt like us. We didn't hug, but we sat together, silent, the painting between us. It was enough. I started teaching Ethan to paint, too, watching him mix colors, his small hands steady. He'd talk about Claire, about how she was funny, how she was trying. I listened, letting his words reshape my heart, letting them guide me toward a forgiveness I wasn't sure I deserved. By spring, we were planning Ethan's 7th birthday. I was nervous, but he was adamant: no cupcakes this time. He wanted a cake, a big one, with dinosaurs. I agreed, my hands shaking as I ordered it. But I trusted him, trusted us. Claire asked to help, and I let her, watching as she coordinated decorations, her excitement genuine. The party was small, just family, in our backyard again. The cake arrived, a T-Rex towering over chocolate layers, and Ethan's eyes lit up. Claire stood back, letting him have the moment, but he called her over, asking her to help him cut it. I held my breath, watching them together, her hand gentle on his, no trace of the woman who'd hurt him. The family cheered, and I felt tears fall, not from pain, but from something like grace. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Claire and I sat on the porch, the stars bright above us. We didn't talk about the past, not directly, but it was there, in the quiet, in the way we didn't need to fill it. I realized then that redemption wasn't about erasing what we'd done, but about living with it, building something better from the ruins. The family was forever changed, split by my choices, by Claire's. But we were here, still standing, still loving. I looked at her, my sister, and saw not the enemy I'd fought, but the woman she was becoming. The woman I was becoming. Ethan's laughter echoed in my heart, and I knew we'd keep going. Together. Imperfect, but whole.